All right, what's up, everybody? It is Monday. I'm Jason Flame. This is the Master Motivation Show, and I'm excited to have this guest today. I have Mr. William Poett. How you doing, Mr. Poett?
I got to tell you, just watching your little intro got me fired up.
I know, I love it, right? Get goosebumps
That
every
you are a
time.
powerful and handsome man. Looking forward to
Ah,
hanging with you today.
well, ditto that, ditto that. Hey, it's so great to finally catch up. We were chatting a little bit before the show started, and it's probably been more than 20 years that we've actually had a conversation or seen each other face to face. And I would consider this face to face as close as we can get, right? But I want to just remind everybody, A, why we're doing this video, and B, just talk a little bit about, how we met, what our connection, and then I'd love everybody to learn all about you. So in 2020, obviously we got hit with the coronavirus pandemic, and just the shit hit the fan with everybody, and everything has changed, right? And so I thought to myself, what can I do to bring a little bit of motivation, bring a little bit more positivity to social media? Because quite honestly, I was getting tired of looking at Facebook every day with all the crap that we see. So I said, man, there were a lot of people that really motivated me and really inspired me in my career in martial arts as a child growing up, as a father. And so I sat down and I wrote out a list of all the people that have had an impact on my life. And when I started training with you back, I believe it was like 1988, 89, at the Conejo Valley Karate Academy in Newbury Park. I remember walking into your school the very first time. I had already been training with Mr. Ichikawa for several years. We moved. It just kind of was in our hometown. And so we found your school, and I was so excited, another Tong Soo Do school. And I got to train with you for a couple years. And one of my favorite memories is we did the Karate Kid 3. We went and got to be a part of that. Shout out to Mr. Agro and Mr. Mendoza, who were some of the other instructors that I remember from back then. But you've always had kind of you left me with an impact that I wanted to share your story, and you're doing so much now that I'm just amazed at where you've been and where you're going. And so I just want to turn it over to you and let you open up a little bit.
Well, it's funny. One of the pictures you used in the promo, me doing a front kick, one of my students reached out and said, God, was that 50 years ago? And I sure hope not, because that'd make me like 75. Um, but it was a while ago. I just turned 59, and I opened that school when I was 25.
Wow.
And it was in 1988 in the Conejo Valley. And, it's been a wild, amazing ride, lots of big wins, lots of hard losses. And I really appreciate your intention of bringing some motivation and positivity. There's so much negative, heavy energy in the world right now. So I'm just really stoked to be a part of the show. I think you're doing a great thing. And I'm looking forward to kind of going back into our past and looking into the future and sharing and learning with you and the audience today.
For sure, for sure. So let's take a trip down memory lane and kind of start from the beginning and talk a little bit about your childhood and growing up, where you grew up, talk about your parents a little bit and your family.
All right, it's and again we got to kind of go back a little ways. I had a really unique childhood. I was raised by two World War II vets. My mom was born in 1921. My dad was born in 1919. My mom would have had her 100th birthday just 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
Um, and I've got an older brother who is about 15 years older than me. I had a sister who passed away, who was kind of right in between us. And it was really interesting. As a kid, I remember having friends come over asking me, "Dude, why do you live with your grandparents?" So I was kind of a late life surprise for them, which for me I think worked out really well. They had kind of figured out the whole parenting thing with my brother and my sister, and great childhood. I think because of their life experience, my dad grew up on a cattle ranch in California. My mom was an East Coast girl raised by a lot of West Pointers. And what happened is they both lost cousins early on in the war. And that's what brought them into it. And my mom was running a USO club in Italy. My dad was a GI, and he was in reading a book on botany. And my mom came up to him and said, why aren't you dancing? And that was the beginning of a marriage that lasted for 62 years. So I was really blessed to have uh, role models who loved each other and who had a history of service. And I think one of the things that I still carry with me from them was having the cattle ranch in California, and we grew up in Woodland Hills and Westlake Village. I was really active in sailing and tennis as a kid. And one of the things my mom said was, you really need to be able to travel everywhere, from a cowboy bar to the White House. And that was really, I was very blessed as a young man, traveled all through Europe and all over the United States and South America. And they really wanted to expose me to different cultures and different environments, and really recognize that everyone has wonderful things to offer, and everybody has, things that they could work on and make better. So I think kind of growing up, the big takeaway was be open, and be really comfortable. And man, I've been in some of the sleaziest cowboy bars you could ever imagine. And, I've been in the boardroom of Fortune 100 companies. And so it's been a pretty amazing ride with a lot of range.
You mentioned your parents had a 62-year long relationship, and anybody that follows you on Facebook, it's one of the things that I notice most is you adore your wife, and you have such a strong, deep connection. Is that something that you took away from your parents, that was something that was really important to you, to find that
Well,
perfect
yeah,
soulmate?
and for total clarity's sake, we're not married yet. We've been together going on 8 years. And um, so here's the double edge to having been raised in a family that has such deep traditions and love. Um, there, it's hard to find a partner that has that same reference point. So I got married early. You met my first wife,
Yes.
Wendy, when I was
Hmm.
running the martial arts school.
Right.
I had every intention of until death do us part. That was what I was raised with, and really something I aspired to. Unfortunately, Wendy struggled with addiction and actually passed away due to liver failure brought on by alcoholism when she was 42 years old. So we were together 16 years. Living with an addict is a devastating experience. It was for myself. Our daughter was 14 years old when her mom passed, and um, there were a lot of dark years in helping myself and my daughter heal and transition through that. A few years later, I met another woman. Again, got married with the intention of forever. And I would say that we share equal responsibility in the failure of that marriage. We were together 7 years, and we became complacent and took each other for granted. So what you see in this relationship with Laura and I, we've been together 7 years, is a real intentional honoring of what I think is the most important thing on earth. And, to love another human being well is hard. To love another person well for 62 years, like I saw with my parents, is unbelievable.
Mm.
And what I've learned from my past failures is it doesn't matter how well I showed up and loved my partner yesterday or the day before, or the week before. It really matters how I show up today. And we both have kind of a ritual where we light a candle every morning. And it's a reminder that today is it. Today's where the opportunity is. Today's where I have a chance to show up and love her, to show up and serve and be my best self. So, now I kind of joke with technology. I still want to make 50 years, and with technology and where medicine is heading, I think I can do it, but I'd have to be like a buck 60 or 120 to at least hit the 60-year mark with her. And I haven't given up hope on that.
Well, I have to say, every time I see a picture of you and just looking at you now, I mean, you look great. You look in great physical shape. You look, you have a great energy about you still. That's what I remember most about you as well, is you just had this energy about you that was very contagious. It was very exciting to be around you. All of us students, really looked up to you in that way, that we wanted to be like Mr. Poet, have that energy and have that confidence. And so I have no doubt that you're going to make it a long time. I think you're doing really well.
Knock on wood, good Lord willing, it's really fun to have role models like Mr. Norris, and and it's interesting because I don't know if kids today. I mean, we grew up. You had Chuck Norris, and you had Schwarzenegger and Stallone, and pretty strong alpha men.
Hmm.
And these guys are still, still badasses. And I remember as a 30-year-old in Mr. Norris's organization thinking, well, shit, he was 50, so he's about 20 years my senior, and he was just ripped. And I'm like, okay, if I can be like that when I'm 50, and then when I was 50, he was turning 70, and so I just turned 59, and the truth is, and I've got some new body parts. I got a new hip. I got new elbows, new ankles, a little bit of a cyborg, but I'm same body weight, within 1 or 2%, same body fat as I was when I was kickboxing in my 20s. So the machine is awesome if we take care of it.
Right, right, right. Well, hey, let's back up a little bit, and thanks for sharing all of that so far. You have a brother and a sister, and so what was your relationship with them growing up?
So my brother, really interesting. We never lived together.
Hmm.
So he was 14 years older than me. When he was a freshman in high school, he went away to a boarding school. There's a boarding school up in San Ynez that my dad was class of 39. My brother was class of 68. Actually, my nephew and my daughter graduated from there. So when I was born, he moved out. And life with my sister, um, she was 7 years older than me. Um, she, I also lost her to drugs and alcohol when she was 46, and she had a lot of, uh, she had mental challenges growing up, and she got involved with drugs and kind of the wrong crowd early on. So she, God rest her soul, used to beat the crap out of me on a fairly frequent basis, probably from about seven, I don't know, 7 to certainly 15. And then, unfortunately, later in life, one of the few times where I had to use my training was she would have these really violent episodes with my parents. And she was a big, strong girl. And I would have to restrain her until the cops came.
Hmm.
And that happened more than once. So, really complicated, really challenging relationship.
Yeah, and you've mentioned two instances now of people that are very close to you that had challenges, struggles with drugs. How has that changed you, and how did that affect you, and what struggles did that really create for you over time?
So if we're open, I really believe there are gifts in everything. And I think as a young man, I don't think I know, I kind of had a little bit of a savior complex, and I wanted to go out and save the world, and I wanted to save everybody. And
Hmm.
that was a big reason behind opening the martial arts schools and what I was doing. And having two of the closest people in my life go through struggles that I was helpless,
Hmm.
literally helpless to have any impact over, was deeply humbling. But it also really made me very clear on where I was going to direct my energy. And there are people who want to change, and there are people who want to learn and grow and be inspired, and there are people who don't. And that's okay. And that was a really hard thing for me to learn. In therapy one time with my wife as she was getting more ill, her whole point was, she said, you were all about positivity and exercise and training and personal development. And so she had sort of gone the opposite route into, I don't know, soap operas and romance novels and sitting on the couch drinking at 6 a.m. And she said that was her way of being independent, which is a really heartbreaking thing to hear from your partner and the person you're raising a
Mhm.
child with. And, you know, everyone is on their own journey. And it isn't my job to fix anybody. And again, it's opened up so much for me in terms of impact by not trying to help fix solve things for people who aren't interested, don't want to, aren't able to access it. So um, I think that is so critical because we, you know, anytime we try to control another person, we give away our power, and we really have no control over anybody else. And so, you know, it took two really hard lessons for me to say, hey, you know, moving forward, I'm going to invest my energy and take care of myself and supporting and helping people that are really inspired to change their lives. So,
Yeah. Again, thank you for sharing that, being real and being raw. And there's, a lot of people that will watch or watching this now or may watch this later that, that may be dealing with that very same situation. I think that that's all really good advice. Now, back to, teenage years, high school. Where'd you end up going to high school?
I went to Agora. Agora
Okay.
High, played tennis for them.
Yeah.
I love. Well, you know, I was the youngest kid in my class, so I skipped third grade, which is a
Mm.
bizarre thing. Not sure why that happened. I don't know what I did better than other third graders.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but looking back, it was hard, man. My freshman year, I was 5'5". I had no hair on my body. I just a little bit overweight, little baby fat left over. And I just remember, these big dudes and thinking, God, this is a nightmare. And then I guess the summer of my sophomore year, I started playing tennis. I got really fit, and I went in and junior year played on the tennis team, loved life. Senior year on the tennis team, loved life. And what did Dane say? Oh, there's
Oh,
Ernesto. Right on. Power of language, strong action. Oh, it's nice to see you. It's nice to see our friends popping in.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah, Dane
so
was just thanking you for sharing that with him.
absolutely. And I high school started tough, and I've got so I have a 30-year-old daughter, or a daughter who's turning 30 in October, and I have a 13-year-old going on God knows what, going into high school right now. And I loved high school. Second half, first half sucked. Second half, loved it.
So I don't know if you and my wife commented too, but I waited for a second. I don't know if you
Go
knew
go
this, but
Chargers,
she,
hoorah!
yeah, she was a 93, class of 93, a little bit after you.
A little
You
bit.
were
I was the last class of the 70s, 1979, baby.
nice, nice. Well, the school hasn't changed a whole lot since then, I bet. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I actually saw a drone flyover just on Facebook like 2 days ago, and
Oh, really?
the other thing which was super cool is so my mom was a teacher in the school district. I don't know if it's super cool. I mean, from an educational perspective, it wasn't. But our teachers went on strike from February through April, my senior year. So we literally lived at the beach. And
Yeah.
they were threatening, you're not going to grade. And my mom said, look, substitute teachers can't give you a grade. So I mean, Zuma 6, all of Agora High School was there. The whole, I mean, so it was like, I've threatened my daughter, eldest daughter, to someday write a book or a movie about my high school, early college times. Loved life, had a really great time, super blessed, and also like glad I'm still alive because we were doing some stupid stuff back then.
Yeah, high school. A lot of people will remember high school in different ways, and I guess it's when different people ask you about who you're talking to. But yeah, I can remember high school. High school was fun in a lot of ways. Not being in high school, it was the stuff that we did outside of high school that was fun for me. That was actually when I did the most of my martial arts training early years. So let's talk about that. When did you get involved in martial arts? When did that start for you?
So I started in college up at Cal Poly, and it's really interesting. I had always been competitive, but in solo events. So when I was 13, I was nationally ranked in sailing. Then I got heavily involved in tennis, played tennis through high school, first year of college, and I loved competing. I struggled with team sports. And I think the reason I struggle with team sports is I've always been real big on personal responsibility. And if I win, I want to know I won. And if I lose, I want to know that I lost. And I want to know how I can fix things. And
Hmm.
and I got out of college, actually left my senior year to pursue a career in real estate, and started training with Roger Lacombe, who, God bless him, is still rocking the martial arts
He
world.
is.
And I really loved the internal form of competition. I really loved, and even though we had tournaments and we would compete and fight and spar with each other, it was how far could I push myself,
Right.
and how much could I grow, and it um, really lit a fire in me. And I remember kind of being a product of the 80s where it was all about making money. I got my insurance license and my real estate license, and I hated both of those things. And I used to sit at my desk and I would doodle like what my dojo would look like.
Hmm.
And that was really where my energy and passion was. And when I turned 25, I got married, bought a house, and opened my first school all in the same month, which I don't recommend to anyone. Um, but that was the birth of the Caneo Valley Karate Academy.
Those were good times. I definitely I remember that. I remember, first of all, that shopping center. I remember when that started getting built up, and then you guys coming in a little bit later. It's so many people from that school. I still talk to. I still Gwen Herod probably the most who I see on Facebook a lot. But you also mentioned too the internal challenge of martial arts. I mean, how many times have we heard, as a school owner at that time, would you hear someone say, I've tried them in every team sport, but it's just not a good fit. And then they find martial arts, and martial arts is this like, wow, I still hear this now. Talk about, was that your first business that other than the
Yeah, I mean,
insurance?
I had done real estate, I'd done insurance. I think, as I look back over my martial arts career and some of the pivotal events, uh, I guess it was just after my second degree black belt test, and I was training with Pat Johnson at the time, and a lot of people know him through the Karate Kid and the Ninja Turtle movies. And Mr. Johnson had given me great accolades about what an amazing test I took and what a inspiration I was. And I went down to the Jet Center, and a bunch of us had wanted to learn kickboxing. And I'll never forget training with a kid. I think he had 6 months of kickboxing experience, nothing else. 2 minutes into the fight, he knocked me out. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because there was this great humbling of, man, and this was pre UFC. And so we were taught a lot of, I'm going to say, questionable things in terms of the power and efficacy of what we were learning. And to have a kid literally kick my ass and knock me out, it really kind of amplified my desire to learn. And that sent me, on this quest. It took me, I mean, I got to train privately with Hickson Gracie. I spent years at the Jet Center with Benny Urquidez. Came in contact, began working with Stephen Hayes, a Serrata Screama master, and really even before the UFC. And then, it's funny because I don't even know what number they're on now, but I had buddies. Reza Nasri competed, I think, in UFC 2 or 3, and he was a Greco-Roman silver medalist, and he got his ass kicked. I mean, I don't think he lasted 30 seconds, and he used to be able to turn me into a postage stamp like in 30 seconds. So there was a real awakening, and I think kind of a renaissance and a disruption, because there were all these people who were raising paper tigers and charging a lot of money for it. And so I did something that was really unconventional. I changed the style that we were teaching within our school, I think 4 or 5 times in my evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And I just couldn't do something I didn't believe in.
Right.
And every time we changed, the school would drop and then grow. And we ended up with 424 active students, one of the top schools in the nation. And this was after we had gone through multiple iterations of what we were teaching. And, it was just really critical to me to access the best and teach the best. And I was young enough in my career that I don't know, I wasn't trapped in a dogma. So it was a pretty wild, and it was definitely a bumpy ride for people who went on it with me.
Right. Well, I remember watching some of those changes and being a part of, the early years. Yeah, talk about Pat Johnson, right? I mean, Pat Johnson, too, is my instructor, Dennis Ichikawa, trained with Pat Johnson, Chuck Norris, ran the Sherman Oaks School in the 70s. What was your experience with Pat Johnson? Of course, he gave you lots of accolades, but what are some of your favorite memories training with him?
So it's a great question. Mr. Johnson is a very complex person. One of the things that I really respect about him is he has absolute clarity. This is how we do things. You're either in or you're out.
Mm-hmm.
We bumped heads. When I first opened my school, I think I was barely a second dan, and typically you're supposed to be a third before you do it. And there were actually individuals in my organization that were taking out surveys as to how quickly I would fail. And unfortunately for them, we were the largest school in the organization. And at one point, I went to Mr. Johnson. I said, look, I just don't know how to run a great school. Do you have any advice? And he did something incredible. He had a friend, Jeff Smith, and Jeff Smith is a world famous old timer who had 3 schools back in, I think, DC. And he set it up so I could fly back. And I spent a week, this is probably in 88, 89, just being a shadow of Mr. Smith's. And I think he had 3 schools. Each of them had over 250 high quality students. And, my brain blew open because at the time, California, a good school probably had 75, maybe 80 students. So the way his curriculum was designed, the way he inspired and motivated and led his teams, it was just awesome. So, I basically on the flight back, I had this dossier of everything I wanted to do to my school. And I'm like a little kid, 26, 27. Everything I have is invested in my program. I go and I have a meeting with Mr. Johnson, and I'm telling him we could do all these things. And he looks at me and says, no. And I remember like, wait a minute, and then at some point he said, well, let me take this to our black belt board and we'll see what we let you do. And I remember him leaving. I don't know if I met at his school or he was at mine, but one of the things that Pat Johnson was very committed to was loyalty.
Yes.
Loyalty, 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 loyalty. I mean, I heard that every single day, right? And so I had this real struggle because I wanted to be loyal to my federation system. And I thought by improving what we were doing was the greatest sign of that loyalty. And so I really did some soul searching, and I thought, okay, well, and I realized loyalty, number one, there's a hierarchy. Yeah, I'm loyal to my system. I got a wife and a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and I've got students. And I realized, my loyalty is to my family, and my loyalty is to my students. And I have a moral obligation to provide the greatest experience possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized, ultimately loyalty should be based on performance. And I believe this to this day. If I can't provide the best experience for you possible, don't be loyal to me. Go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I think as purveyors of any service, my job is to be at the cutting edge. And the way I'm going to have loyalty from people is I'm going to always be learning, growing, expanding, and providing the best experience possible. And so, I sat with it. I wrote a letter that I shared with all of the black belts in our organization. I don't know how many there were at the time.
Mm.
Um, and I said, I have the greatest respect for Mr. Johnson. I have the greatest respect for this organization, but this is what I have to do.
Right.
And I've got to follow my heart, my intuition. And I left, and I don't care anymore. But so there was a decree that black belts that I trained and grew up with were no longer allowed to come to my studio.
Right.
And, we would have fight nights on Friday nights, which were super fun. And we'd all get together and beat each other up and then go have beer and pizza at Lamppost. And, one night, apparently, someone sat in the parking lot and wrote down all the names of the people who were at that thing. And there was a lot of drama.
Right.
Now, you fast forward about 5 years probably. I had now been receiving some national awards for our school. We were named a top 100 facility in the U.S. 3 years in a row. And I got on the cover of Martial Arts Industry magazine. And it was the month before Mr. Johnson was on the cover of it. And it was interesting, in his article, he talks about me and what a great student I was. And so apparently, water under the bridge, and we're all good. And I hope he is well. I think he's an amazing man. He's done amazing things. But it was it was a little bit of a rocky relationship for a while.
And I think the story you're telling and all the information that that's something that in the 80s, really, I mean, that happened in a lot of schools. That was happening all over, and the thing that really sticks out to me in everything that you said is, if we're in the service industry and we have students and we have a family to take care of, it is our moral obligation to do what is best for our family and for our students. And if that means leaving an organization, branching out, then that's, like you said, what needs to be done. I've been very fortunate that my relationship with my instructor over the years has, had its ups and downs as well. But I think he learned too from Pat Johnson that it couldn't always be black and white, and there had to be a little bit of flexibility, because our organization is still intact. I would say that he has allowed us to kind of give that flexibility. I've worked with the Martial Arts Industry Association for the last 15 years, and got a chance to do some consulting with them. And there were times I remember the very same thing. Hey, we should do this. This is going to be so awesome for our school. It's going to give our students a great experience. And it's like, nope, because we've always done it this way. So we got to stick with, so yeah, those struggles are there, and I'm sure any martial arts instructor or school owner that listens to this will not only appreciate it but understand, what has happened in years past. But you got a chance to train with Sensei Benny, probably one of the most amazing martial artists that I've ever seen or had the chance to listen to. Um, Tell me about some of your experience with him. You got into kickboxing a little bit too. I mean, you got in the ring and fought at least a few times. Is that correct?
Yeah, and Sensei Benny, what a larger than life person, and one of the things that I've learned in my 30 years and really having moved out into the kind of corporate global world, um, truly powerful, competent people are the most humble you're ever going to meet.
Mm.
They got nothing to prove. And Sensei Benny was just quiet, kind, and if he came up and moved your elbow, fist, I mean, such authority and clarity around his knowledge, right? And it was based on, being considered pound for pound the best kickboxer that ever lived. And it was really cool because it was, Pete Sugarfoot Cunningham used to teach our classes, and Sensei Benny would teach our class. I mean, so it was before, I guess it was Roadhouse, where Benny was the guy for Patrick Swayze. And as martial artists careers evolve, sometimes you sort of lose that access with them. And I mean, it's just super fun to have been in the martial arts in a time where there were these legends, and there's still legends today, right? Just different genres of them. But it was such a pivotal time, because with the Gracies coming in, and the first couple of USCs, and I don't know if people realize this, but I think the first 3 or 5 of them, like, no weight divisions, no time limits. I mean, it was an all-out brawl, and it was brawls of Shotokan versus Tang Soo Do versus Jiu-Jitsu. Like, it was crazy time, and it was really, really fun. And like I said, I got to spend some time training with legends, and really being able to elevate my skills, and super, super grateful for that period of my life.
Yeah. I was just reading a book this morning by Chuck Norris, talking about Zen philosophy, and he brings up Benny Urquidez, and talks about a lot of stories. It was just kind of interesting to hear things from Chuck Norris' perspective, talking about Benny Urquidez. I mean, like, those are two major influences in the martial arts, and talking about training with Bruce Lee. It was really cool. And you brought up a name, Peter Sugarfoot Cunningham. I used to love to watch that guy fight. I just absolutely, I was amazed by him. I think the first movie, or the first time I saw him in a movie or something, he was in No Retreat, No Surrender, I believe, with Dale Jacoby. I think that he was one of the fighters in there.
That's a great movie.
But awesome, right? Jean Claude's first movie. I was probably 16 years old, I think. I was just old enough to drive it. My friend and I packed up our car and drove to Vegas to see. It was Dennis Alexio, Kathy Long, and Peter Sugar, and Sugarfoot was the one that I wanted to see. Like, I'm going to this kickboxing fight. And it was such a time where kickboxing was so prevalent. It was just so popular. It was the thing, like you said, before the UFC exploded. And I think they're on like 264 now. I think that's where my son's an avid fan. He watches every pay-per-view. But then you moved into, you talked about Stephen K. Hayes, who, again, like, I remember Black Belt Magazine seeing Stephen K. Hayes, the American Ninja. Like, that was so cool. What was that like?
So that was a fascinating pivot in my life. So I was a member of a national martial arts kind of industry organization, educational funding company, and they kind of ranked the top schools based on revenues generated. And Fariborza Jacques, who is still an amazing martial arts legend and still out there crushing it every single day,
Yep.
he had arranged to have Will Mayer, who was one of Stephen's students out for a workshop. And something, I don't remember exactly what happened, but Faribar said, I've got this situation. Can you host him at my school? Now, what's weird for any of us from that time, ninjutsu in California had a really bad reputation. There was Frank Dukes had a bunch of schools, and he was doing some nutty ass stuff. And Will was teaching ninjutsu, and I thought, I'm not sure I want this guy to come out, but he was running the top school in the country, so I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Guy came out to my school, and the simplicity and the efficacy of what he was teaching was so powerful. I remember we went back to my house, and we were probably having a couple of beers, and we were talking, and at the time I was really frustrated. I had a cop I was training who worked out of Rampart. He and his partner had one of the highest felony arrests back in the day. This is pre-Rodney King. And he just had this little squat body where he was like all torso and short legs. And that guy couldn't do a spinning heel kick to save his life, right? Let alone a jump spin heel kick. And because of the way he was built, he was never going to get a black belt in what and how we were teaching. And it was really bothering me because the guy was such a great martial artist. And I was talking to Will, and I remember him saying, the thing about ninjutsu is the art adapts to the individual. And if you're giving a black belt test and you have any two black belts that look exactly the same, you have failed as an instructor. Well, I'd grown up in Tang Soo Do where we want to have 500 people on a field looking exactly the same, right? And so it was this really cool timing for me. And so I started training with Will. At the time, Stephen wasn't taking any students, and I went to a festival with Stephen. We really connected, and I ended up getting a third-degree black belt from him. I helped him launch the Quest Center franchise together. Mm-hmm. And one of the greatest memories I have is we took a group of maybe 8 students on a trip to Japan and kind of traveled through and followed the route of Daisuke Nishino, who was sort of attributed as being the founder of these different historical Japanese ryu. And I loved, the other thing that I really loved about the work with Stephen and ninjutsu, or Toshindo as he calls it, is there's a very strong psychological component where you really look at how a person is feeling in combat. And then you learn how to move in a way that is in sync and appropriate with those feelings, right? So if I go out and I got a couple of kids sitting on my car drinking beers, I'm going to be feeling a certain way. Hey, guys, just get off my car, right? Now, kid slides off, pulls out a knife. That's going to cause a reaction in me, an emotional reaction, and there's a way to move within that. Now, one of these guys grabs my daughter. That's going to cause a completely different emotional reaction. And so a lot of martial arts, even when they are very valid in what they teach, it's still somewhat mechanical. Somebody does this and you do that, right? And in this higher level of training, there was a lot of psychology and energy work, excuse me, around how am I feeling? What's the energy of the fight, and how to move best within that? So I loved training with Stephen and with that group, and I think that and the Filipino Serrata training for me held the greatest amount of authenticity, and I was able to experience the greatest growth in those two systems.
Well, you've had quite the evolution in martial arts over, the past 30 so years. And I, like I said, I've kind of watched those different transitions. I had friends that trained with you in Newbury Park. As a matter of fact, my brother, I believe, is occupying the same unit on Giant Oak that you had moved to at one point.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, actually, it's not great because I think you had kickboxing bags hanging,
Yeah.
and the weight of those kickboxing bags, the roof collapsed 2 days ago.
No.
Yeah, so they're working on that right now. But I just think that
Wow.
those parallels in life are just so funny. And you brought
So
up
he's got a
Farbors.
school there?
Yeah, yeah. He opened. He actually started below that, near where the post office was.
Yeah.
Right by In and Out, and then they moved up into that unit. I'm not sure how many years ago, but yeah, they've been there for a bit, and
Wow.
yeah, he's
Blessings
been
have
doing
been
great.
left to him, and I hope that roof gets fixed.
Yeah, it'll get fixed. It's just, we go from COVID to that. It's like, why couldn't have happened during COVID while they were training outside anyway?
Right. Right.
But you brought up Farbors too, and he'll be a guest actually on the show in a few months from now. But man, another person, you talk about Benny Urquidez being humble, Farbors being humble and giving. I'm really looking forward to our conversations, and it reminds me too that that's also an early memory that I have. I think it was Tom Bloom, Dan Anderson, Farbors. You had what we called the SCKL. Is that right?
Southern California Karate League.
I remember competing in those tournaments. It was so cool to have our own, because you had to go like NBL and all the other stuff was kind of like out in a way. So it was finally we had something here and local and cool.
We had sweatsuits, fanny packs, and mullets. We were
Absolutely
we
the
were
best.
legit, 100%.
I remember those big old balloon pants with the stars and stripes. That's
Yeah.
that classic 80s stuff. Well, let's move on from the martial arts, and as you transition out of that business, what was next for you?
So, kind of two, again, big sort of life pivots. One was I grew up in the 70s with watching the old Kung Fu on TV and Kung Fu theater. And there was a belief, an espoused belief that martial arts was a pathway to enlightenment.
Mm,
And unfortunately, that wasn't the experience that I had. And as I got to spend more and more time kind of behind the curtains with some of the very best in the world, um, I didn't see that. I saw the same issues and struggles that every human is having. And again, kind of to that humility thing, it was almost like the individuals that positioned themselves as the greatest masters were some that had the most serious issues. I don't know if you know much of the story of Steve LaValle or if you follow that at all, but
for sure.
a horrific example of the gap between what we are saying we are and what we're really doing and living. And we don't need to get into that story here, but I've always been looking for pathways and vehicles and ways of really elevating how I am able to show up and move in the world. And as I was traveling and kind of building and growing my schools, I had a lot of high level executives training with me. And I was simultaneously getting to do some work with guys that were on special operations teams and running really kind of elite crews and squads. And I got to really get some firsthand experience of what and how the best in the world were operating. A friend of mine was the squad leader for the FBI hostage rescue team. And I got to go back to Quantico and work with him and really see how he led and formed these elite groups. And so I had people in the corporate world asking me if I could come out and do some leadership and do some team building with them. And
Hmm.
I really enjoyed that. And I've always studied high performers, whether they were in the martial arts or athletics or business. And so it was kind of a natural segue to move into doing leadership, doing executive coaching, doing some team building work. And I loved it. And I loved it from the capacity to impact. If I was able to help a C-suite of an organization that has 10,000 employees really come into alignment and really come into clarity around their vision and mission and values and goals and have a sincere desire to transform the culture, Then instead of impacting maybe 30 people on the mat, I could go to work and I could impact 3,000 people or 5,000 people. And that was kind of, that transition started about 20 years ago. And I've been doing that work ever since. And then about 7 years ago, right after my book, The ABCs of Peak Performance, came out, I was on a radio show, and that's where Dr. Lara Ciel comes in the picture. She interviewed me, and we found that we had this great uh, harmony around philosophies, which is really ironic, right? Because I was this senior college dropout, martial arts, weird ass guy. And she was like, I don't think she ever got a B in a class, got her, undergrad in business and economics, and got her master's and doctorate in clinical psychology. And we ended up at the same place of understanding about energy and about alignment and about flow and how to bring that to groups and organizations. And 3 years ago, we started a company called 9Q. 9Q means energetic intelligence. And martial arts is all about moving energy. It's about developing and harnessing energy. Business is all about energy. So in physics, energy just means capacity to work. So labor, capital, people, resources. And so we've developed a couple of frameworks that allow companies to come more into alignment, really harness their energy and elevate their people. And the other thing which we really rail against is the idea of human resources. Humans are not resources. If you look at the definition of a resource, one of them is something used or expended in pursuit of a goal. One of the problems with traditional business models is that we literally use people. And part of what's happening with COVID and part of this massive global transformation is, people aren't willing to be used anymore. And millennials and Gen Zs refuse to be, like, they're turning down offers to be senior partners at company because they've seen the bullshit lives these people are leading. So there's a really wonderful opportunity to help guide a transition where we elevate people, where we empower purpose-driven companies. It's not enough to make a dollar. Can you elevate your community? Can you have a positive impact on the environment while being successful? And that's been where all my energy and focus and joy has been. Just went back to school 2 years ago. I got my MBA, which was really cool because there's one program that allows 10% of their students to come in based on your CV. So I never graduated from Cal Poly. I don't have an undergrad. But I was able to qualify and get into this kind of high-level master's program to help us scale our company. And I wish my mom was around to see it. She was an educator for 30 years, and she would have loved seeing her kid finally graduate from college. But, this has been all part of this crazy-ass journey I've been on.
Well, it's amazing to hear it, and it sounds to me too, I'm guessing that when you got into becoming a martial arts instructor, you loved martial arts so much, you loved what martial arts did for you, so you wanted to help other people, right? So now you're helping people. And then you realize that as you become a school owner, you can now empower people to become your instructors and to help you reach more people. And now you've just taken it to a whole new level where you're not just helping that person in the school or in the company, but you're actually helping the company to reach more people and a much broader spectrum. And I think that, I don't want to say it's natural progression, but it seems like you have just taken that ride all the way through. What do you see happening for you next?
So it's really cool, and it's funny because I feel like I've been on a straight line journey. Even though externally it might look like I've done all these things, my desire has been, I want to learn how to be the best person I can be. I want to figure out how this thing called life works. And then I want to help other people have the greatest experience they can. And what we're doing right now is there's a company, we're actually flying back to Atlanta in 2 weeks. There are new learning deployment technologies that use AI and really allow a much deeper, more engaged virtual learning experience than has ever been possible before. And so now what we're looking to is how can we take these frameworks that we teach within 9Q and how can we scale them globally? And how can we have Microsoft on board 100,000 employees and 3 weeks later have a more engaged, cohesive, aligned team? And technology, the technology now exists to where we can do this. And as a guy who's getting up there in years, I have no desire to get on airplanes and hump and sit in a room and do a 3-day workshop. And I've done that, and that's kind of a younger man's game. But the idea of building something that has the ability to really go global and sustain beyond me is super exciting. And that's literally what I was working on before I jumped on our call and what I'm working on as soon as I get off the call. So accessing AI, accessing technology to, again, elevate the human experience. That's the next phase.
Amazing. It's really exciting to hear you talk about it. You have a great passion for it. I can see and feel your energy when you talk about it. So I'm looking forward to watching you continue to grow and continue to change people's lives. As I said in the beginning, you've had an impact on me. Although it was 20 or 25 years ago, it still lives in me what I learned from you. And I enjoyed being a part of your school and just having that opportunity. And I just love the connection that we still have, even after all of these years, albeit on social media. I still, pull inspiration from what you post and what you say and what you're doing. So keep doing it. And if you can, in just the last 60 seconds, if you could reach out into the screen right now and talk directly to everybody that's watching, give them your 60 seconds of inspiration and motivation.
So every single person on this planet has a gift, and it's only going to come around once, and it lives inside of you. And when we conform and when we rebel, we sort of deny our own greatness. And I really hope everybody owns how awesome you are and is willing to put in the work to fulfill that. I mean, it's this is like it doesn't happen. A garden needs to be tended. Your gifts and your genius need to be developed, and you got to put in the sweat effort, man. Get to the gym, learn something, develop more emotional intelligence, and then share your gifts as big as possible. And Jason, what you're doing here is so powerful, and what a gift that you are embodying and bringing together people that have inspiring stories and histories. And I'm really proud to call you a friend and to be a part of the work that you're doing, because I believe in it.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you
You
very
bet.
much. Means a lot. Hey guys, thank you for tuning in for this interview today. I've really enjoyed talking with William Poett and look forward to our upcoming interviews. Looking at July, we got Ronnie Camacho coming on. We got Rafael Gomez, Rick Rando, and one of my personal mentors for many years. We have Mr. Mike Metzger coming on. And I'm just looking forward to continuing these interviews each and every Monday. So make it a great week. Go out there and like Mr. Poet said, use your gifts, hone your gifts, keep growing, keep learning, keep training. Mr. Poet, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. And hopefully we'll catch up soon in the future.
All right. Thank you, my friend.
All right, guys, that's it for today. We'll see you next Monday. Take care, everyone.